Hello, hello, it's Dr. Kevin Sansberry. So, a lot of my work centers on detoxifying organizational culture and climate. And one of the aspects to think about is from the perspective of the candidate. Today's conversation will center on green flags to look for in the job search process. So, feel free to use these tips whether you're a job seeker or an organization. Let's talk about it. So, as we think about green flags to look for in the job search process, I'm going to frame the recommendations both as in the job search process, and I'm also going to provide some recommendations in the interview process. So, as we think about the job search process, think about posting salary ranges. Huge green flag, because what this does is demonstrates respect of the time it takes employees in this process in itself to spend in the job market. And it also is transparent to be able to show that, like, this is what we're going to pay, because why should a candidate have to wait until the end of the process to then learn that they're going to be grossly underpaid from what they are now or paid below market of what their expectations were for role? So post salary ranges is a great thing. Now, this also takes another layer as you would think about equity. Many women, people of color, are paid less than their counterparts in very similar roles. And so by posting salary ranges, it gives an authentic and equal playing field for individuals to make, bona fide career decisions as it relates to, what the pay is going to be. And there are many states that have laws around pay transparency now, which is making this more of a reality. And these transparency laws also provide candidates the ability to freely discuss their pay without fear of retaliation from their employer. And so, a huge green flag in the job search process is if the salary rate is posted, because gone are the days where employers are able to play that game of like, I'm going to pay you the least I can and get the most productivity out of you. It's in both the employer and the job searching, the candidate's best interest if everything is kind of transparent related to pay, because you don't want somebody to come in the organization and then through water cooler talk or what have you, they find out they're underpaid compared to their peers in very similar roles. This is not the organizational culture that I know many organizations want. And so it's important to just be transparent so that people can make the best decision. The second aspect to think about, and huge green flag, is visible inclusion. And so notice I didn't say visible diversity. I can buy visible diversity. You can buy stock photos. You could also just corral anybody who is, racially dissimilar in your organization, or ableism, gender diversity, any kinds of diversity. We can falsify that in photos and things on a website. And so I don't agree with that being the metric as a green flag, because to be honest, there's a difference between true representation and tokenization. And so it's really important for organizations to be able to be authentic with how they display and demonstrate, any aspect of DEI. But let's focus on inclusion. And so how do you demonstrate inclusion in the job search process? Well, first, let's start with all postings will have EEOC language, so equal employment, opportunity language in their postings that talk about, the stock language of, we're a non-discriminatory place on the basis of boom, 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 right? Well, the thing to think about here is organizations may have that on their posting, but they have a choice to say more. And so visibly showing the inclusion through having an addendum to that, or maybe demonstrating hey, here's a link to our page where we can talk more about we can show you more about the work that we do in DEIB, that we do in anti-racism, that we do in, all forms of anti-oppression. Put the link on the posting. Show me, that inclusion and that equity as soon as I'm even considering a hire for that job. Second, when you think about how the posting is written, look at how inclusive that posting is written. So you could be talking about the language they use. You could be talking about pronoun, taking out binary pronouns. You could talk about how we are person first in our job postings. And so talking about, how the person will be successful in role and not just a laundry list of tasks and duties. And so think about the language itself in the posting to be demonstrative of inclusion. With that being said, the posting itself is one thing, but then how are you supporting individuals in a job search process with the posting? And so some organizations have also showed their inclusion efforts by having options where translation services can be involved, different things like that. And so that's a way. Now, you might be saying, wow, we don't have the resources for that. Where can we start? So you could start with the EOC statement and kind of expanding upon that and being very open and deliberate about how you demonstrate your DEI. You could also be inclusive by creating what's called a candidate resource page. And on this page, it could be a page where some organizations have also shared, here is our interview process. This is how our interview process works. This is what type of interviews you will have. This is what we expect. And then you could take it even a step further. Some organizations I've worked with, we started actually giving the interview questions to candidates beforehand. I mean, I know your defensiveness or you're nervous. What is that? Why do you do that? Think about, as we're trying to be more equitable, as we're trying to be more inclusive, how could that help individuals? And so one of the aspects of why we did that is because in this study I did with this organization, we noticed that interviewers who may be neurodivergent or may have different cognitive processes of ways of seeing the world, they actually didn't perform similarly as it relates to our traditional interview process where charisma is the name of the game. And so one of the things that helped in this process was, well, let's equalize the playing field. How can we equal the playing field? Because I don't want someone's nerves or someone's, just different ways of processing to be biased out of a process, of interview process and job selection, because they could be the best candidate. But due to just how we look at interview success and fit, don't like those, but due to how we look at like those kinds of aspects of it, individuals tend to get biased out, unfortunately, and they might be the best person for the role. And so to equal the playing field, some organizations, and especially ones that I've coached, we've started providing, on the candidate support resources page. Well, we created a candidate support resources page, but we also started providing those interview questions to equal that playing field. And it has done tremendous effort as relates to showing our inclusion. We've gotten so many thank yous to like, I've never seen this before. This has really helped me in the process. And, even if the person didn't even get the job, they just demonstrated their their gratitude for us being inclusive to their needs. And it just made the interview process such a beautiful experience for them to go through, because you don't want the interview process to be like American Idol or something where somebody has to like audition for you and they have to like like that that's not the job. Is that the job? Is that the job? Like my question is, you want to hire someone to do a job, to perform tasks and things like that. Interviews are super nerve-wracking for a lot of people. And let's be real. Let's take the perfectionism out of the equation here. Interviews are super nerve-wracking. And what tends to happen is we hire the person who has the best ability to do impression management in most cases. I'm not saying, everybody does, but we hire the person typically who is basically able to present themselves the most professional and and have more charisma and be more extroverted. And though we like them, that's what we do. And so I want to equalize the playing field a little more and take somebody's nerves or somebody's cognitive, processing, ability. I want to take that into account and create a world that is equitable in this process that we all know can be nerve-wracking. And so that's the second red flag to think about during the hiring process. So let's transition into, let's say we get through the hiring process. What are some aspects and some green flags to think about during interviewing? So like, as let's say hiring process, green flags to look for, let's actually talk about what to look for as we're interviewing. And so the first piece to think about there is panel composition. Who is on your interview panel? There are a lot of stories that I have from many people that I coach where it's like, well, I applied for this DEI job and everything looked great on how they wrote it. But when I got there, the panel was all white men, or the panel was all managers, or the panel was all whatever it might be. So you have this panel that basically has we all think alike, or we all look alike, or we all have, we have this diversity job, but just then that message that it's sending, keep in mind of what that is sending to the candidates. And so your interview panel composition is important. There's also research, and if you look at research in the academic area that looks at more diverse panels from a gender standpoint actually lead to more gender hiring of women. And so it's important to consider the benefits of having a diverse panel. And so it's a green flag if organizations do a good job of diversifying their panels. And I'm not just talking about representation. I'm also talking about role in the organization, through up and down, your organizational chart. Just having a good composition and a good mix is just bare minimum, green flag. Second green flag is levels of transparency. So candidates that I coach, I give them questions to ask during interview processes. And a very important question to ask is about the organizational culture itself, about what organizations are doing related to DEI, what organizations believe related to DEI. So not just what they're doing, what they believe related to DEI. Asking those questions are important, but then being able to listen for the level of transparency, the level of candor, and the level of self-awareness that manifests related to that answer. I'm not a fan of the whole toxic positivity piece because we get afraid to talk about things that are not going so well because we look at it as a deficit. Well, let's take a growth mindset approach and look at that as, well, hey, here are some opportunities that we have. I'm actually proud we have opportunities because that means we're in reality here because every organization has opportunities. And so what if, as you're talking to an organization, they're framing opportunities versus, oh, we don't want to share anything with you. It's the best place to work ever. And it could be, but talk about opportunities. Let's be honest about it because candidates, that goes a long way. Because if I go to your organization, and I'm not saying this is valid, but this is what people do. They're going to go to glassdoor.com. They're going to look at your social media. They're going to look at the news about your organization. And that will serve as their basis of reality of what your organizational culture and climate is, right or wrong. And so your job is to be honest about it and share opportunities and share growth too. So it's take a growth mindset related to your organization's struggles or anything that your organization doesn't deem or view as positive per se, because you wouldn't want we don't want candidates to sugarcoat. We want candidates to be honest. That's why you ask them, what's your biggest weakness? That's why you ask them, what are some growth theories? That's why you ask them, if I talk to anybody who worked with me, what would they tell you? You want to know about the candidate, right? So why do we expect such honesty and transparency, and yet organizationally we don't do the same thing? So the green flag is the organization is honest and being able to speak from a place of growth. Green flag. The final green flag that I'll talk about is simply thinking about the interview relations. And so what interview relations means is basically, how were you treated in the interview itself? When you talk to people, were you welcomed? Were you offered beverages? Were you treated in a friendly manner? Going a step further in conversation, how was the conversation? Was it a conversation? Or was it just this weird Q&A, oh, boom, boom, where they're checking the box or going through some, going through some template all robot-like, So is it a conversation? Is it open? Is it affirming? How were you greeted? How were you, sent off? All this kind of thing. Another green flag to think about, how are you treated when you call about the interview status? Because I'm not saying all organizations have a way to see my status quickly and all that kind of stuff, but sometimes people are treated like they're annoyance, they're an annoyance, or sometimes people aren't even followed up with. Just a big green flag. And it might be a process thing. It might be a scale thing. Our recruiter might have a lot of folks to talk to and all that kind of stuff and a lot of job openings. So take that with a grain of salt. But again, look at treatment. And this goes to organizations too. Look at treatment, factor in how you treat people when they don't get the role, factor in how you treat people when they do get the role. It's just all green flag, because we want to know, I've heard a quote from a lot of recruiters, the candidate shows up as their best self in the interview. Well, let's flip that. So does the organization. So it goes both ways. With that interview relations piece, another thing to think about to get a insight about the organizational culture is this essential question of asking, what do you like most about the organization? And, hearing how people have that conversation with you. And that's a really human way to just build that connection with folks and being able to see, again, how they feel about the company. And so all kinds of ways to look at green flags in this process. I just wanted to share a few tips with you. And so I appreciate you listening. I'm Dr. Kevin Sansberry, signing off.